Hello, today's project is going to be a journal, a sort of half and half junk journal, art journal, more art than junk, but I am going to be using a few different substrates inside for my pages. The reason I'm making a journal is I've just registered for Everything Art's advent calendar of prompts. I'll leave the link below to their YouTube channel and to the website, and you can watch the introductory video that Kasia does explaining sort of what it's going to be about. As far as I'm aware, because I mean she hasn't let out that many details, she's going to be offering up 24 prompts starting tomorrow, December the 1st. Registration is free up until December the 5th. After that, I'm not sure whether registration closes or whether there's going to be a charge. So if you're watching this before the 5th of December and are interested, please do go and check it out and get yourself on there. And all I can sort of gather really from the introductory video is this isn't about making complete finished journal pages every day for December, but more about setting aside time to take part in just some sort of creative exercises, just to make time to sit and enjoy the art process. And I thought that's something that really did appeal to me. December is a busy month for me. I mean, really sort of September, October, November, right through to Christmas is quite busy time. And I spend a huge amount of my time making DT projects, making videos for YouTube, for you, for magazines, my Christmas cards, my Christmas crafting. And it really appealed to me to actually just set aside a little bit of time for me, just to sit and enjoy something for myself rather than something that I'm having to share or give away or do for somebody else. So that's why I'm taking part. I have a couple of art journals. I mean, I have journals that I'm working in. I have a couple of journals that I haven't yet started, but I thought this might be a nice opportunity just to make myself a small journal and just something special really, so that I can sit and enjoy this whole sort of process. So I've gathered together a few little bits and pieces that I want to use. Obviously I've got a needle and some strong thread for stitching my signatures into the journal. I've got some leather that I'm going to be using for the cover. I picked this up from my local scrap shack. They're sort of furniture samples of leather, so sort of not overly huge pieces. So that sort of helped me decide on a format for this journal. And I'm going to be making a cover with little pockets on the inside, so I can possibly stiffen it with a little bit of cardboard tucked in, or just use that as storage for some collage papers or something. And I'm just going to stitch those in place. I've got some little buckles here, Tim Holtz Ideology buckles, picked those up in a Black Friday sale, so I'm going to use one of those on a little leather strap for a closure. And for my substrates, inside I've got some watercolour paper. This is quite a heavyweight watercolour paper, watercolour cardstock from a pad. I have this lightweight card with a parchment sort of design to it, which I thought might be a nice alternative to a white background. I've also found a piece of canvas paper. This is from a pad, suitable for acrylics and oil paints and things like that. I thought it might be nice to include a couple of pages using that. Some brown paper bags, but why not? Again, a nice alternative to a white background, and these do take wet media reasonably well, especially with a bit of gesso or something on. And finally, I've got some vintage music here, and I thought I'll put some of that in as well. Now, as I said earlier, there's going to be 24 prompts. I'm going to have more than 24 single pages, but I will have the option of doing a double page as well as a single page. If I don't fill the book up, it doesn't matter. I can continue to work in it after these prompts have finished. And the size that I'm going for, as you can say, I'm sort of tied by the size of the pieces of leather I'd got. I'm basically going to be working in what in the UK we would refer to as A6. I believe that's A2 in the United States. So if you imagine this is A4, sort of letter size, I'm going to be cutting this in half and then folding it. So each page is going to be a quarter of this. And over here, this is an A6. I'm going to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that that is A2 in the United States. It's going to be a nice smallish size. I don't want anything too huge. I'm not going to have a lot of time every day. So I want to be able to just sit and enjoy this without that whole huge blank page to have to sort of get over. If I've got time at the end of the video, I'll also gather together a few of the materials that I want to use. Again, the whole sort of idea of this is to keep it quite minimal and have a small selection of products to hand that you're going to use. Just keep them together where you can easily get at them, and that way you're much more likely to just sit down and start rather than having to make decisions about what you want to use and where is it and can I find it. And also it makes it a lot easier just to pop it all away at the end of your session, ready for the next day, and you can just begin again. So if anybody who's interested in the measurements that I am using for this cover, I have made a little template here because I'm going to need this for marking holes for signatures. And basically this is 26 centimetres across by 16.5 centimetres down, and that is the size that I've cut this piece of leather to for my cover. The spine of it is going to be 2.5 centimetres wide. That's going to give me enough depth in there for the pages when they're in there. And so if you want to mark that out on your template, you'll measure in 11.75 centimetres from each side and just draw yourself a couple of lines just to denote where the fold will be. Obviously, I can't score this. This is a piece of leather, but you're quite welcome to make the cover from a piece of cardboard, in which case you would want to just score down those two lines. And then I've measured in 2.5 centimetres from the top, 2.5 centimetres up from the bottom, and that's where I'm going to make some holes. I'm going to sew in 4 signatures, so I've evenly spaced 4 holes there. They're each going to be 5 millimetres apart in that little spine area, and another row right in the middle. So this is 16.5 centimetres altogether, so this would be 8.25 centimetres down just to be the centre point. And we've got 3 rows there so that we can do our like a long stitch binding into the case. So the first thing I want to do is just get my sewing machine and stitch these 2 little pockets in. These are just 2 offcuts from another piece of leather. They are 7 centimetres across and obviously 16.5 centimetres down. And I'm just going to stitch along those 3 edges. And then, as I say, I can either stick a piece of cord in there just for stiffening it up. This is very soft leather. Or indeed just keep those as pockets just to tuck in some bits of ephemera or things like that. So I'm going to stitch those in place and mark my holes or punch my holes for the stitching in here. And then I'll be right back and we can start cutting our pages down, ready to fit inside and create our signatures. So I've stitched my pockets around and I've decided that I am going to stiffen this cover with a piece of card. And I've just cut another piece of this craft card that I've used for my template. You could put something decorative in there if you want. I think it just suits the neutral feel that I've got going with this. But I think I'm going to be happier in the long run with this, with a little bit of stiffening in. And because of that, I'm going to have to stitch through not only the card but also the outer leather. Now here you could just stitch into the cardboard and have the leather as a slip cover that you can take off, but I don't want to take this off. I'm going to keep it all in one, and I want to be able to see the stitching through on the outside as well, so I'm going to be stitching through both layers here. And the measurements that I used just to make this inner stiffening was I just worked out where my stitching was, and cut a piece to fit inside. So it's about 1 centimetre or so smaller than the original piece of leather, but it just fits in there nicely. And I've marked where the spine is, and I've marked where my holes are just by piercing through on my template, lining it up and drawing through the holes with a pencil, and that's just given me my dots. Now you can just use a pokey tool or an awl to make these holes, but because the leather has a tendency to want to close up around a small hole, I'm just going to use a very small hole punch. This is from a set with like an eyelet setter and a hole punch, and it is the smallest one. It's smaller than the size on my crocodile, which I had a feeling might be a little bit too big. So I'm just going to use this with a hammer to punch holes through on my dots. I've got a cutting mat underneath, and all I'm going to do is just line up the hole punch over the dot, give it a couple of bashes, and it will punch those holes through both the card and the leather. So I'm going to do all of those. I'm not going to keep hammering on the camera, and I'll be back when I've done that. Now I have my holes punched in, and I'm not sure whether that's going to show up or not. Difficult to see, but I have punched through both the leather and the cardboard there. It's time to start thinking about our signatures. So for this, I've just started by cutting down my cardstock and paper stock, and I've cut these larger pieces in half because this is the size that I want them to be for my pages, and I'm just going to fold them in half, and this is how they're going to fit in. That's the size I'm going for. Not everything is going to be exactly the same size. The canvas paper was a slightly different dimension to the watercolour paper. The vintage music was a slightly different size. The paper bag, I've just cut the closed end off. So again, that's going to be a slightly different size. But as long as they all fit within the dimensions of the journal, I'm not bothered if there's sort of a centimetre difference in the height or the width of the pages. It really doesn't matter. It'll just add to the interest and quirkiness and just give me, you know, a slightly different format to work on each day. I could use a scoreboard to do this, but I'm not too bothered. It's not difficult. I'm just folding everything up, and then I'm going to work out how I want my signatures arranging. As I say, I've got holes for 4 signatures. And when I folded these up, I'll divide the pages equally amongst 4 signatures, and then I can mark my holes in for piercing, and then we can stitch them in using a pamphlet stitch. So I've arranged my 4 signatures. I've just put a selection of the different types of paper and card in, and alternated really throughout the 4 signatures, and they're going to go into my journal like so. What I need to do now is make some holes in there ready for stitching, and for that I always find it useful to get a telephone directory, yellow pages, just something where you can sort of sit the fold of your pages. And I've made myself a small little template here just with 3 holes in. So there again, as we did with the original for the spine, 2.5 centimetres in from each end and 1 right in the middle. And I've just made a little hole, and I can just line that up on my pages, centralise it, because obviously my pages are slightly shorter than my journal cover. And then taking my pokey tool, punch a hole down through all the pages, through all 3 holes in my template. And then just check that we've gone through all the layers, which we have. And I can stitch that into the cover before I do the next one. And this is going to be my front one, so this is the front of my cover. This is going to be the first signature. I've threaded my needle up with some of my thread, and I'm going to go through this central hole from the inside, leave myself a bit of a tail because I've got to be able to tie off. And I'm going to go through the centre hole of the cover. Don't want to pull that end through. Then I'm going to go through the bottom hole of the cover and back in through the bottom hole of the signature. This can be a little bit tricky if your pages have just got misaligned. Just work it through each of the layers. Then we're going to go straight to the top and back down through the top hole. And through the top hole in the cover back to the outside. And then we're going to go back in through the centre hole in the cover and through the centre hole in the pages. Now this might just take a little bit of fiddling because you've already got a piece of thread in there. So again, just sort of go through a page at a time if you need to. I'm going to come up on the other side of this central thread. So I've got my beginning tail on one side, and I'm going to come up on the other side of this central thread and just give it a tug. Just make sure that it's tight. Just take the needle out and tie it in place. And then you can just trim the ends off. And that's our first signature stitched in place into that spine. And you see we get 2 long stitches down the spine. So I'm going to continue that for each of the 4 signatures. And then when I've done that, I'll come back and we can do the closure. My signatures are all stitched in place. I'm really pleased with this. You know, I've got a great choice of papers to work with, and it's a nice little chunky journal, which I always like. Neat stitching on the back as well. I'm just going to do the closure. And for the closure, I took a piece, I'd got a length that I trimmed off the width of this piece of leather. I've had to make a join in it and stitch an extra piece on to make it as long as I needed to. And I'm going to attach one of the little Tim Holtz buckles, and they come with a brad. So I'm just punching a hole in the leather so that I can line up the buckle and pop a little brad through. So there we have our buckle. And this is just going to basically wrap around, and I'll punch some holes in it. I think I might make a loop just to tuck the strap under, and that'll just be glued with a little bit of glue. I need to punch some holes in the other end so that obviously we can fasten the buckle. And they're going to run from sort of here to the end, so it gives us a little bit of leeway for if this journal gets fatter. And for that, I'm going to once again just use the crocodile. Really handy, quick and easy way to punch holes. Just want to round the ends, the corners of this, just to take the point off. Trying to decide which is going to be better. I think actually the larger one. And that just gives a little more finished edge to it. I'm undecided whether I want to attach this or not permanently. I think I perhaps do. I mean, I could thread underneath these stitches here, but I don't want to stretch the thread. So I'm considering just attaching with a bit of glue along the back so that it stays attached. I think I'll do that, and I'll just say make my little loop so I can tuck the tail end of the buckle through. So here we are at last. I have decided to attach the closure strap, and in a brainwave that would have been easier to do earlier on in this the whole process, I've cut 2 slits in the back cover of the leather. Haven't gone through the card on the inside, just in the leather, and I've threaded the strap through. As you can see, I've made a little retaining loop there, and at least this way, when I undo the strap, it's going to stay attached to my cover. It also disguises where I've stitched the 2 pieces together. But as you see, it hasn't come through the cardstock in the back, it's just through the leather. This, as I say, probably would have been easier to cut 2 slits in that before, but I just went through carefully with my scalpel just until it parted the leather, but before it cut into the cardstock. Really, as I say, very, very happy with this. I have a nice choice of substrates to work on. So depending on what the daily prompts are in this Advent series, I've got plenty of choices to work with, and it's going to be nice to be able to be thinking creatively and choose to do what I want. And obviously, hopefully, if I really enjoy this, I've got plenty of pages in here that I can continue to work in here, or I could work on one side and journal on the other side. Really don't know. As I say, I don't know what the prompts are going to be. I'm just excited to be able to be making a little bit of time for myself and my art, and just do something that I want to do. And I think it's important to me that I've got something nice to work in. This is my journal. I've created it. Nobody else has got one the same as this. So this is for me, and that, as I say, is the whole point of this process, is about making time for yourself and your own art. Excuse me, losing my voice a little bit. So I'm all set for tomorrow. I'm going to gather myself some products together. I've run out of time today, I really have, but I'm going to be choosing a couple of pens, probably some Neocolor water-soluble crayons, the Neocolor 2s, I like those, possibly a couple of scribble sticks. I'll choose a colour of paint and some gesso for prepping any of the pages that may need a little bit of prepping. More than likely we'll have my Stabilo All pencil because I like that, water-soluble pencil, and a white gel pen because I really like those as well. But it's going to be a small selection that's going to fit into a small box. I'm not taking many products for this. I'm going to put this downstairs and I can sit downstairs in front of the TV, you know, with my partner in the evening and just work quietly for perhaps 20 minutes, half an hour. So I'm going to get on with that. Please, as I say, do check out the links below if you think you're going to be interested in this series of prompts. If not, I do hope that you enjoyed watching me make this little journal. It's a very easy process to do. In places I feel I've made it probably look a little bit more fiddly than it is, but it really is quite straightforward. And one of these would make a perfect Christmas gift this time of year, to be fair. I know I'd be thrilled if somebody made me something like this. So as always, if you enjoyed this, please leave me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. And I shall be back again soon. But for now, that's all. So bye.